How's that for an intro, pipe pals and gals? Boy, I'm smoking a delicious Canadian here. Got a little Canadian right there. And we'll talk maybe a little bit about that in honor of Alberta in negotiations or talking about possibly leaving, I guess, Canada and becoming the 51st state of America. Hey, Alberta comes to America. I like that. When I first got up here to the lake, now we're not technically, I guess, I talked to a geologist one time. He said technically Lake Tahoe is like would be considered the southernmost part of the Pacific Northwest. So, but when you think of Pacific Northwest, you think of, Washington State and Oregon and, places like that, anarchist countries. But anyway, so I'm back here. That is really good. Now I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, I'm smoking Canadian with in it. Tonight, we got a little bit of the Black Velvet from Briar Patch, probably about 14 years ago. And Briar Patch is no more, sad to say, and I still have some tobaccos that I fondly remember from Briar Patch and still have in my collection. And this is a little white dot Canadian that I also bought at the Briar Patch many years ago. And the reason why, now I was going to smoke this pipe here. This is a beautiful Danish freehand, but it's also a poker, so it sits by itself. You can sit it down and say, sit, stay. Okay. And I got this in Rochester, Minnesota. No, I got this in Twin Cities, St. Paul, Minneapolis. And I got that when I was in Minnesota, and I want to say I have a very fond place in my heart for Minnesota. Minnesota, don't you know, out and about. I kind of came to in a cornfield in Minnesota, quite literally. Got my life back a number of years ago, decades now. So I have nothing but fond memories. I mean, I say fond memories. I don't mean that like I had a fun time, but it was a great period of growth in my life. And so I was going to smoke this in honor of kind of what's going on in Minnesota this weekend, tonight, whatever. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But I decided to go with this Canadian. Both of them are places in the world that there's upheaval. There's people that are upset and angry, and one is trying to use, I guess, law, the rule of law to determine their destiny, where other people are using anarchy to determine their destiny. We'll talk more about that later. But one of the reasons why I'm smoking a Dunhill tonight is because last video, I kind of shared with you my newfound curiosity and interest in men fragrances, okay? And it was interesting because in watching some of these videos, guess what I found? I found Dunhill. Dunhill actually has a fragrance. That's interesting. Dunhill has a fragrance. And I love this this cylinder because it reminds me of something else. Like Big Brother, Little Brother, And I just love that. This hatched pattern was on my Dunhill lighter, and I see the same hatched pattern. So when I saw this, and again, kind of being interested in fragrances, I said, you know what? I might just go ahead and buy that just for the novelty. And then somebody said just the other day that these are going away. So I actually think I ordered another one just to be on the safe side. The fragrance itself, again, I'm not a connoisseur of fragrances. I'm learning about fragrances. And we'll talk about how that relates to pipe smoking in a minute. I think I shared a little bit about that. But basically, it's kind of I guess they would call this more of a fresh fragrance for guys. Again, when I was a young guy, probably, when I was a kid, and then later when I was maybe in my early 20s, I was intrigued a little bit, not a lot, by things like, as I think I said this last video, like British sterling and English leather and high karate, And I was never a person that used aftershave or any kind of cologne for a long time, right? And just now I'm just kind of experimenting with it to see what it is. I'm going to say something that's probably going to be a little bit too much information, but about 6 months ago I saw a video, and it kind of, in a very disparaging way, but I think they were trying to help people when they're old people like me, saying you want to avoid the old man smell, whatever that was. But then again, I kind of realized, I think I know maybe what they're getting at, that but everybody should practice good hygiene, regardless if you're young, old, or in between. But somehow there was this sense that, old people smell funny, Now, maybe there's some truth to it. I don't know. Again, if you've practiced good hygiene, I don't think you have anything to be concerned about. But a lot of people, and one of the things that they pointed out, and it was one of these AI kind of videos, so I take it with a grain of salt, but saying that, elderly people, they don't maybe take good care of themselves like they used to. They and sometimes they will use cheap fragrances to kind of mask a bad odor, and that's what you don't want to do, That's kind of a verboten. That's rule number one, I guess, in the quote unquote fragrance community, that you have good proper hygiene before you start trying to use a fragrance to accentuate, not to bombard people, And so anyway, it got my attention, and I started thinking about it. And there was a couple of things that they mentioned in that video about not trying to smell like an old person, and a lot of it had to do with just basic personal hygiene and just changing out your towel, every other day, maybe every day, and have a fresh towel or something like that. I mean, like I said, probably too much information, and it's probably not really germane to what I want to talk about, really. But again, it's an interesting thing. And so, but on the heels of that, started in my YouTube queue came these quote unquote fragrance videos. There's this, again, I think I showed a picture of this young woman, and she's quite frisky, I'll say. She's quite frisky. And, but she has a wonderful way of presenting. I have to say, of a lot of YouTube presenters that I've seen over the years, she's kind of got a natural persona and charisma all her own, and very captivating and fun to watch, And so I was kind of intrigued, and I started thinking, maybe just a little spritz here and there may not be such a bad thing. Again, not trying to mask anything, but trying to just kind of make it things so you don't fall into the old man smell or the old person smell. And so anyway, I'm just kind of experimenting. But when I saw this, being an avid Dunhill collector, I thought, my goodness, I here we are. This is the full circle. Dunhill. Maybe that'll be maybe I'll make that my thumbnail for the video here. Dunhill. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, or maybe this. Dunhill. So anyway, but as far as the essence of the fragrance goes, it like I said, it's kind of like a clean, fresh smell. It's not an overpowering, sickening sweet smell. Most of these things don't have a lot of, as they say, projection. If you put on a little bit on the morning after your shower, you can probably detect it. And if somebody got close, they might detect something. But as far as it being like some over obnoxious kind of a fragrance that's going to choke people out, it doesn't really come across that way. Now, they do talk about if you're going to be going out in a nice event, or you're going out on a date or something, you might want to make it a little bit more pronouncing. But again, it's a balance kind of a thing. You don't want to overdo that, because then the people that you're going to be around might be kind of like, oh, what's going on with that guy, So again, they say you want your fragrance to be detected, not announced. Like, hey, here I am, because that's I guess a faux pas, if you do it that way. So again, it has to be subtle. It has to be, but something that's pleasant. Something that it's not going to repel people. So anyway, and I'd say the Dunhill fragrance it's a basic one, and for my nose, it doesn't smell bad and it doesn't smell obnoxious. So you have that spectrum. Does it really smell bad, or does it smell obnoxious? And then somewhere in the middle is kind of like the sweet spot. So if somebody kind of goes, are you wearing a fragrance or whatever? In other words, you're like, oh my goodness, or like, I got to get a gas mask, that kind of thing. But that leads me to talking to a little bit about the correlation that I think pipe smoking, even cigars to some extent. Yeah, actually, I could make that case that when you think about cigarettes, I mean, they smell like cigarettes, but they don't have a beautiful incense, to them. Even the more pungent. Now, again, it's not like I used to be a big fan of pirate cake. I still think I have some in my collection somewhere. Maybe I'll break out some pirate cake one of these days and celebrate, history or whatever. I remember one of our YouTube pipe presenters of years ago said he went and got some pirate cake on my recommendation, and he brought it home, and his wife basically said, "You're not smoking that in this house." So talk about a unwelcome fragrance, to be sure. But again, some people enjoy those more pungent fragrances, and some people clearly don't. But anyway, but when you think about cigarettes, I mean, it smells like a cigarette, but it doesn't have a beautiful bouquet. It doesn't have a real beautiful fragrance. It just smells like burning tobacco, Now, again, I said in my other video about the correlation and the connection that fragrances have with pipe tobacco is that, I remember, again, when I was a little kid, and I would smell the aroma of a pipe burning somewhere, it would get your attention. You go, oh, there's somebody smoking a pipe somewhere, because you could always tell that it wasn't a cigarette or even a cigar. It was a pipe, clearly. And part of the attraction, I think, for me, was to be able to smell the beautiful bouquet, the beautiful aroma of a burning pipe, that wafting, angelic, fragrance. And so I think there is clearly a connection between these two things here, because pipe smoking, again, yes, we taste the smoke flavor that we call, whether it's cherry or we call it an aromatic or we call it an English or whatever, and we can, our tongue tastes a lot of that. But the real enjoyment, or at least 50% of the enjoyment, I think, is when you can actually just sit and enjoy the aroma of someone smoking a pipe. So anyway, I just think that it's an interesting correlation, interesting connection, and I've been kind of fascinated with that over the last 3 weeks that I've been, just kind of going through the Christmas season. Again, it goes back to the idea of a beautiful church incense. And in fact, a lot of well, not a lot, but some of them notably they'll say, oh, this has like a church incense note to it. And it's like, oh, interesting. Okay. So I haven't tried one of those yet, but maybe in the future, maybe as I'm watching some of these videos from time to time, I'll jot it down and say, because they clearly point out that it has a church incense. They say that directly. It has a church incense fragrance. And I'm going, oh, okay. I don't mind smelling like church incense. I mean, we burn incense once a weekend when we do Mass. And so I don't do it at every Mass because, again, some people are very sensitive and, they've been kind of led to believe that anything that has anything to do with smoke is somehow super bad for you. It's like smoking. Well, it's not smoking. The only thing that's smoking is the thurible or, the brazier that's in there. Now, again, I know there's a thing about secondhand smoke, but again, we're not talking about clouds and clouds and clouds of incense in the church where people can't escape, like I'm, turning it into a gas chamber of some horror like that, We had a nun, I dared to even call her a nun. She was a religious sister. I think she would even prefer that designation herself, from Minnesota. And but so she didn't like me. She didn't like traditional Catholicism, and anytime I would use a little bit of incense at Mass, she would find a way to get the kids to start coughing and choking like they're dying. And one time I was doing a little bit of incense, and the response was this instant cacophony of all these 30 or 40 kids, and I'm going, I hardly even put a little puff of smoke in the air. And plus, they're like 40 feet away from the altar. They're not like right up close. They're not like sitting in like a little, reading circle around the altar. Nothing like that. There's plenty of space in the sanctuary and the nave. So it's not, it's not anything toxic. But I was always intrigued that the kids would break into the moment I touched the thurible. When I went to it, because it's hanging on a chain, the moment I would touch that, they would start coughing. And I kind of think, well, wait a minute, there's something a little odd about this. So one morning I decided, okay, I'll play the game. And instead of putting the charcoal and the incense in the thurible, I just didn't put anything in there. There was no smoke. There was no fire. There was nothing. And sure enough, as soon as I touched that chain to pick it up, and I looked over at the sister, and I kind of gave her a wry smile, like, gotcha. And so at the end of Mass, she came back to complain. I said she was going to complain about the incense, And I said, sister, let me show you something. And I took her back to the back room where we put the incense after Mass. And I said, look at this. There's nothing in here. There was nothing in here at all. And yet the children were coughing like there were clouds of smoke in the church, and there wasn't a single whiff of smoke at all because there was nothing in that thurible, period. No charcoal, no incense, no fire, nothing. And I just looked at her like, we know the jig is up. And so anyway, but that's a fun story to tell, I guess. Anyway. But that I said, I think I remember this young YouTube girl, lady, and she was the one who coined the phrase, pipe smoking is incense for the soul. And I just loved that. It was so poetic, and I think it was so accurate. And so, incense for the soul. I think that's a marvelous, marvelous way of talking about pipe fragrance and pipe smoking and and the enjoyment that it brings. Okay. So, yeah. Okay, about a quarter into this video now. So I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about a lot of things, and I'm going to talk about some things. Unfortunately, some of the things I'm going to talk about aren't very pleasant. They're not something that's enjoyable, like incense and pipe smoking and fragrances. It's depressing things, it's ugly things, it's sad things. But I did want to make comment about. There was a couple of things I wanted to talk about. Apparently, I guess one of the things that happens right at the beginning of the new year is this thing called CES, Consumer Electronics Store. I don't know if it's store, but symposium or whatever. Anyway, they introduce all these concepts. It's not just consumer electronics. I think it's more like concept electronics. There are ideas that may or may not go to market. But they're supposed to be like, ooh, look where our tech is going to go now. And where we can expect it to be maybe in 6 months or a year. And I normally watch a lot of those CES videos, but unfortunately, because of what's going on in the news, it's gotten eclipsed. There's hardly any of them. I think there's a few of them I've seen. I've watched two. One was, kind of like talking about some pretty interesting things, and the other one was kind of like lampooning, CES and talking about, oh, how crazy these things are. And again, you got to take everything with a grain of salt. Sure, there's cool tech, and there's weird tech, and then there's really atrocious tech. It's kind of like the fragrance thing, or the smoking a pipe thing, or versus the cigarettes, So it was interesting, but unfortunately, I didn't see very many other videos. Apparently, Apple will be coming out with a foldable phone like Samsung Galaxy 7, I guess that was, Galaxy Z Fold 7, which I really, when I first started watching that, I was really intrigued, I have to tell you. And if it had an Apple operating system on it, I probably would have gotten one. But again, I'm not an Android person, I'm an Apple person, and so it wouldn't be as helpful. It might be, like I said, last year I got a little Windows Surface just to kind of be in parity with my friend who's trying to do video editing on his Windows machine. And I thought, well, if I had one, then I could kind of troubleshoot things when he has problems. And I go, I can't figure this out. And I said, well, maybe the two of us together can kind of, figure it out, So that project is still kind of ongoing. His quest to digitize all of his videos, VHS videos, onto something more digital, like so he can play them on his computer. But anyway, so where was I going with that? Just the idea that the Windows, not Windows, but Apple's going to come out with a foldable is intriguing. I probably, if it does come out, if it's compromised, here's the problem: the iPhone Air was a real compromise. The battery life was terrible. The camera system was terrible, and so even though it was sleek and I like the fact that it was made out of titanium, much more durable than the current one that I have. I would like to see them keep all the major features and put it into that new form factor. That would be awesome. But if they're going to be cutting corners just to get the form factor, say, oh, look, it's a foldable iPhone. But it won't really be worth the money, because it's going to be really expensive, because it won't have those pro features. Because a lot of people that buy the pro iPhones, like I do, we use them for videos, and video editing and all sorts of high graphics video stuff, Photoshop and Final Cut Pro. There's not Final Cut Pro on the iPhone, but there are alternatives to Final Cut Pro on the iPhone. I don't know if I would really want Final Cut Pro on the iPhone. But anyway, and then, it's just an interesting thing. And then there's apparently then Apple's also going to be introducing an actual, this is kind of something that bridges, I guess, the gap between the phone and the computer, is that they're supposedly they're going to have a new MacBook, but it's going to be running on an Apple iPhone chip, I guess an A19 chip. So that's, it's interesting. Now, we'll have to see how the performance is. It might be really atrocious. Again, this is the thing. You can do certain things in technology and say, oh, we can do this. But is it going to have the same benefits? And is it going to have the ability to have the same output, that something that is reliable, something that you do use on a daily basis? Or is it going to be just a niche thing that kind of like, oh, it's a novelty? The one Apple product that I really loved, and they got rid of it after about a couple of years, is the little 12-inch iPad, not iPad, a 12-inch MacBook. It was kind of, I guess, and it wasn't, they didn't call it the Air, but it was slimmer and thinner than the Air, and it was based on a little ARM chip, the first one. And, technically, you could do a few things with it. I mean, but you really couldn't overdo things. You know, like if you wanted to make a video like I'm making, if it was maybe a 10-minute video, you probably could get away with it, but it just didn't have the power. I mean, it was cute. And if all you were doing was just internet stuff and maybe playing solitaire and maybe, you know, writing, you could do a lot of probably word processing on it, no problem. But not much more than that. So if you were trying to do photo editing or video editing, no. One guy tried to prove that, well, it did work. It worked, but it was probably slow as a glacier in a winter, you know. But anyway, so apparently they're going to try that experiment again now with these new Apple, high-end Apple iPhone chips. So we'll see. I might pick one up just for the curiosity of it. If they put it back in a 12-inch factor, I probably would for sure, because I loved that. I thought it was really cute. I thought it was fun, and but I don't know if they make it just like a regular MacBook Air or something, I probably wouldn't get one. But anyway, if they make it kind of unique with that chip in it, I might, like I said, I might be tempted to pick one of those up. And they're supposed to be really inexpensive for an Apple product, that is. Oh, there was something else I wanted to talk about. Well, I guess that ties in with the thing that I'm going to talk about probably next. Hold on. So, let me play this video first, and then I'll be back. Okay, here we go. Roll the tape.
Hello everyone, Chef Grady Judd here. I've been asked by media outlets and several people to comment on the event that occurred in Minneapolis yesterday. Let me make one thing abundantly clear. You have to be accountable for your conduct. And that starts with the mayor. Did you hear his filthy talk? Did you hear his filthy, uninformed talk yesterday to the people not only of the city and the state, but across the nation? Shame on you. That's lack of professionalism. Now let's look at the event. The investigation's not complete. I am giving you context on the video clip that I saw. Law enforcement officers, federal law enforcement officers, ICE agents, were trying to take the occupant of the car out of the vehicle. During this encounter, the vehicle backed up and then drove directly at the ICE agent. That is a deadly weapon, a 2-ton deadly weapon. So what did the occupant expect? They should have expected to be shot when you commit a deadly assault on a law enforcement officer. So let's do this. Let's send out the message loud and clear. And it should start with the mayor, the police chief, the local sheriff, and the governor of Minnesota. Cooperate with law enforcement officers. Don't resist them. Don't violently resist them. If you do violently resist them, if you do felonious assaults with 2-ton weapons, expect to be shot.
Okay, I'm back. So I played that little video message from Sheriff Grady Judge down there. And I guess he's in, where is he in? Dayton County, Polk County, Florida. I think he's from Florida. He's a Floridian. And I've always liked Grady Judd. Always liked him, probably always will, because he's for law and order. Okay? Now, what happened in Minnesota, now I'm going to say this, but I have to explain it. So this lady, I think her name was Renee Good, and she's gone now, and that's good. Yeah. little play on words there. Renee is gone, good. Okay. Now, I don't rejoice in the fact that she lost her life, not at all. But it is, when I say it's good, I'm not, like I said, I'm not rejoicing in her demise. But it's good in one way that an agitator, a hateful person, a person who kind of saw themselves as the main character in their movie, doing silly things and winning silly prizes, had to find out the hard way that you don't threaten an ICE officer, an ICE agent. So Grady Judd makes it very clear that if you're going to engage in that kind of behavior, there's going to be accountability. And I have to say that is probably the name of the game, is that we live in a society now where people can do hateful things. They can do fraudulent things. They can do all sorts of nefarious things, and if you try to hold them accountable, hold their feet to the fire, then you're the bad guy or the bad girl, whatever. Look at that young man, Nick Shirley, who was just filming the fraud that's going on in Minnesota, and it went viral. You see all these quote unquote school daycare centers, and there's no kids there. You see all these medical quote unquote companies, there's nobody there. It's fraudulent. They were literally taking advantage of the people of Minnesota, and they were like, hey, we're getting away with this. Who cares? And apparently the governor and a lot of his cronies there were turning a blind eye to it. They were enabling it. They were ignoring it. They were negligent in their fiduciary responsibilities to safeguard the finances of the state of Minnesota. Because why? Because the Somalians, who, sad to say, most of them do have no interest in being Americans. They want to repopulate Minnesota and make it little Somalia. And Governor Walz was complicit in all that. And so when you see the federal agents trying to do their job, then these people like this lady, this Renee person, felt that she was in some kind of like maybe, I was thinking about this. Why do these people act this way? And I think that they have been watching too many movies like V for Vendetta, The Matrix, fighting the evil agents, like agents, Agent Johnson or whatever his name was, or Star Wars even, the evil empire, we're the Rebel Alliance, They're having a hard time differentiating between reality and fantasy. This gal probably thought she was again the main character in her rebel movie. Look at me, I'm a real rebel, and I'm going to stand up to these people. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that are happening is a result of people having the wrong narrative. What I mean by that is that a lot of these people now, and you hear it in the way they talk. You hear how they even say it almost directly, that the ICE agents aren't real law enforcement. They're like rent-a-cops. They're like rent-a-cops with an attitude, and somebody unfortunately made the mistake of giving them guns, but they're not real law enforcement. Well, yes, they are. Yeah, that's why I played that little clip by Grady Judd. And so, if you and I were to go out and do risky, dangerous things, thinking that somehow we're immune. Like, I'll give you a real life example. The other night, I went to dinner, had a nice dinner with some parishioners. Well, for the most part, it doesn't get brutally cold up here. It doesn't. Maybe in the low 30s. Now, sometimes when it does dip down, and it'll dip down to like the single digits, well, that's different. And last night, I went to downtown Truckee, and unfortunately, downtown Truckee, we're still kind of in the holiday season. It's kind of people want to go out to eat, and they want to go out and drink or whatever, and so it's hard to find parking. So I thought, well, I'll park down the street, and I'll just walk to the restaurant, no problem. but I'd never been to this restaurant, and I was depending on my Apple iPhone and Siri to get me there. It didn't. And but it was 23 degrees, 22 degrees. It got down to like 19 degrees, and I normally don't wear any kind of a sweater or a jacket for the most part, because when it's in the mid 30s, it's comfortable to me. That's actually true. But last night, it was cold. And the other problem was I didn't wear my tracks. These are maybe some of you have heard of them. If you live in cold climates, you know what I'm talking about. But they're these little slip-on cleats that help you not slip in the ice. Because when you get a slip in the ice, you can really, really do some damage to yourself. You can break an arm, break a wrist, break a leg. I mean, within it, just like that. And so it was dark, it was icy, and it was cold. And so Siri put me on this little wild goose chase, and I literally walked completely around unnecessarily. There's a big, long stretch of commercial buildings, maybe about a half a mile long. And so it took me on this circuitous route. And even when I passed the restaurant, it kept telling me, no, you need to go down further and turn right again. I'm going, turn right again, but I just turned down that street. And they kept trying to tell me to go down. We need to go down this road. I said, I already went down that road. Fortunately, the gentleman who had invited me to dinner, he came around and goes, hey, Father, what are you doing? I said, I'm looking for the restaurant. He goes, it's over here. And I went, oh. And he goes, didn't your GPS tell you where it was at? And I go, it was directing me to go back around the building again. And anyway, fortunately, he came out and he goes, you don't look too good. I said, well, I'm a little cold right now. And he goes, well, where's your jacket? And I said, I didn't realize it was this cold. I really didn't. So, but I did something dumb and stupid. And I would, for the first 15 minutes, I was just trying to get warm in the restaurant. So I wouldn't say I was grumpy or anything, but I wasn't very animated. Like, I'm, yeah, how you doing? It's like, yeah, how you guys doing? It's good to see you. And I thought, well, it's my own darn fault because, I thought I'm impervious to 23-degree weather, and I didn't have my ice cleats on. And so, I was nervous if I had slipped, and in fact, I was in the back alley and I was talking to some guy. He was standing there with his phone with a cigarette. And I said, hey, I'm looking for this restaurant. And he goes, oh, I think it's down that way. And, and then I slipped. I almost slipped. I did slip, but I didn't fall, thanks be to God. But it was in the shadows, it was completely dark when I left that little awning where he was at. He had a little light in his little, this little cubicle where he was standing by the door. And then I said, he goes, it's down that way. And I went, oh, okay. So then I slipped. I stepped off that, and I slid, but I didn't fall. And I went, golly, I couldn't see the black ice. So I was feeling a little bit nervous last night because I'm going, you know what? I did something really reckless. I was stupid. And if I had fallen and hurt something or broke something, which happens a lot up here, I'd had nobody to blame but myself. And so this lady who charged the guy with the car, what do you expect? First of all, they were trying to block ICE vehicles from going down the street. That was their first mistake. The second mistake is when they told her to get out of the car, she didn't. And then the third mistake was, I guess her significant other said, drive, drive, drive. And she gunned it, and the guy got off one shot, maybe two. And, she lost her life. It's regrettable. And again, like I said, I don't rejoice in it. But, again, I was just making a kind of a play on words when I said, Renee is gone good, because that was her last name, Good. I like to make play on words sometimes. But, it's sad because, unfortunately, we have too many people in our country today who want to vilify, our federal government. They want to see themselves as, the rebel alliance, and we have the moral high ground, and we're the good guys, and you're the bad guys. It's like, no, that's. I'm sorry, that's a very childish way of looking at it. And the narrative is that Orange Man bad, and ICE agents bad, and anybody that supports them is bad. No, I'm an American, okay. And the problem, I think we're seeing it now. One guy said, and I watch his videos, he's an interesting guy. He got in a lot of trouble because he was trying to help somebody, because he was like a student, he was like a professor, and then he had a student that was very, very anti, Donald Trump. He says, well, let's look at that. Why do you say that? And he had him try to like, okay, now what makes you say that? What's your, not your feeling, but what's your facts? What substantiates your fact to say that he's quote unquote bad? Anyway, it was a very famous video, went viral. Eventually, I think it got him fired from his teaching job, I sad to say. But then he kind of bloomed on YouTube, and so maybe he's doing a great job on YouTube. But anyway, I think his name is Warren Smith. I think that's a young guy. Anyway, but he thinks that, civil war is going to happen. And I would simply say, I don't think civil war is going to happen, because civil war implies that you have two groups of Americans that are coming against each other. But what we're really seeing in Minnesota, in Portland, places like that, are not Americans, they're anarchists. They're true anarchists. They hate this country. And if they could overthrow this country and try to, God bless them, what are you going to put in its stead? Because they don't tell you what they're going to do. That's the problem with revolutions. Revolutions, for the most part, are pretty bloody nightmares. You look at the French Revolution, you look at the Russian Revolution, you look at any revolution, it was pretty bad, because a lot of innocent people, true innocent people, were certainly put to death and killed. Just to look at the bloodbath of the French Revolution, that was horrible. That was evil. And and of course the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, was even worse. So, but so a lot of these people have been lied to or told, well, because America isn't perfect, and guess what? It's not. Never has been, never will be. Just like your family, just like you and me, we're not perfect. And so, but these people have been taught, well, because America's not perfect, it has a tainted history, it needs to be, obliterated. It needs to be, absolved. It needs to be reduced. It needs to be destroyed, demolished, And that's a pretty desperate thing, sad thing, but that's where a lot of these young people find themselves. And not just young people, but even people like me, boomers, who believed all that stuff too. Back in the 60s, with all the quote unquote rioting back then. I think a lot of these people, and I think I've said it before, say it again, they're people that I think in some ways they don't have anything else to do. Some of them are clearly paid protesters or rioters. They're not protesters. I believe in a person's First Amendment rights to protest. But when you start, attacking people, you start, breaking, vandalizing, you start using weapons, even if it's quote unquote, throwing a can of soup at somebody, that's a weapon. That could kill you. Hit you in the head just right, you're dead. Okay? And you're impeding police officers in their lawful duties and their in either investigations or their detentions or whatever, and you insinuate yourself into that situation, you need to be held accountable. Again, this is the problem. I think our bedrock problem is we've allowed these people to get away with all this stuff, the fraud, the waste, the abuse, and we've kind of like, well, we can't be. And law enforcement doesn't want to do that. They are they're negligent, they're derelict in their responsibilities as upholding the law. They have to, we have to enforce the law. This one police guy goes, well, we have to all determine what are the laws that we really want to follow. What? No, that's already been decided. Your job as chief of police to enforce the law, to bring law and order to your community, not just stand back and watch it all fall apart like they do in Portland. Golly, these people, man, I could go on and on and on about these people. They're reprehensible. I think that's the best word I can use. They are truly reprehensible. And they need an accountability check. They need somebody to, and it looks like it's happening. And again, that's what they don't like. Old Governor Tampon Tim, boy, he's in a lot of hot water. Not only is he in hot water for fraud, waste, and abuse, for negligence, fiduciary negligence, and now he's actually said, and again, now it could be, kind of interpreted to maybe downplay it a little bit, but I think that every time I hear him say it, he's talking about he's going to mobilize the Minnesota National Guard to stand against the federal ICE agents or the federal troops that might come in. That's a serious thing to say publicly. That's irresponsible. It's reckless, because you basically are saying that you are now insurrection. Remember last time that happened, it wasn't again a nice turnout. A lot of people lost their lives. A lot of people lost their homes. So anyway, I really hope that there will be a moment of pause. It's interesting. This lady gets shot because she's trying to run this guy down, and then they all go instant George Floyd, right? And when Charlie Kirk got shot, remember all the rioting that happened after that? Remember all the rioting in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination and true murder? He truly was assassinated. He truly was murdered. There was no doubt about that. You can't say, "Oh, it was an accident. He didn't mean to do it." But you remember all the rioting that took place right after that. Remember all those places that got burned down, all the businesses and homes and everything. Remember all that? No, because it didn't happen. People took to the airwaves and they voiced their grief, their sadness, their shock, their anger. Yeah, that's legitimate. But they didn't take it out into the streets and start demolishing, businesses and breaking glasses and graffitiing things and screaming and epithets, nasty, vulgar sayings like that Jacob Fry in Minnesota, and the irresponsible things that the bonehead governor says there, and the hateful things that Ilhan Omar spews. Just disgusting, just absolutely reprehensible. And I hope that they will get what's coming to them. They will be held accountable. That's what we want. Again, I don't want to see people die. I don't want to see people, be, unwrongfully treated. But when you're a seditionist, like these people that hate America, they don't love America. They have a new idea of what America should be. I mean, during the George Floyd riots, his wife, it was Tim Walz's wife, said she liked to open the windows and smell the burning tires because it smelled like change. She kept talking about change in the election. Well, guess what? We changed. Yes, we did. Like changing a dirty, stinky diaper. Yeah, that's what I think of as Tim Walz and his wife and Ilhan Omar. They're like a dirty, stinky diaper, and we need to change them and get rid of them. Yeah. Send them back to where they go. The best thing that can happen is Tim Walz loses his job. If he goes to jail for his conduct, that's on him. I'm not wishing that happens to him, but if he's being held accountable, he probably will. Ilhan Omar has to have her citizenship removed, and she needs to be deported. She needs to go back to her. She says she's here for Somalia. That's what she says in many of her speeches. You can find it on YouTube. I support Somalia. I'm here for the Somalians. Great. Go back to Somalia. Let us help you do that. If that's your desire, that's your goal, then God bless you, girl. You go back to Somalia and you make Somalia great again. Okay? Or make it great. Or make it at least tolerable. Make it a functioning country. But it's sad what's happening in Minnesota. But again, all these people, all they need is just a little excuse to go out and cause riots and mayhem and chaos and bring about disorder and hatred and anger, spew their anger because they're mad, they're angry. Well, again, like I said, you remember all the riots that happened after Charlie Kirk was killed, right? No, you don't, because they didn't happen. That's the difference between people who are for law and order and people who are for anarchy. And that's where we're at right now. They're not Americans truly, they're anarchists. They want to see the overthrow of this country And many of them will not rest until they think that they have succeeded in overturning this country, getting rid of, whether they want to get rid of Donald Trump or they want to get rid of Republicans or they want to get rid of, Christians, whatever. They're definitely on the warpath. They're not afraid to say it. They're not afraid to say it whatsoever. And they're hateful. They're filled with a rage that is unrealistic. And instead of being a rational person saying, well, if I go out and play in the freeway, chances are probably good that I might get hit by a car. Or if I drink alcohol excessively, chances are I'm going to get cirrhosis of the liver, okay? If I cheat on my wife, I'm probably going to get caught and I'm going to ruin my marriage and my family. Good bet, right? So you engage in risky behaviors, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. That's all there is to it. And you have nobody to blame but yourself. Take some accountability. That's why it's so important that we all take accountability for our lives. You say, okay, I made a bad mistake. I did something I shouldn't have done, and I say, hey, I was wrong. Okay, probably the best thing to do is say, okay, I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. Okay, and but to have this it's like they're living in a fantasy world. A lot of these people, that's all they. I think this rioting for a lot of young people, and I've said this before, is sort of like it's like entertainment for them. Watching YouTube videos or Netflix gets boring after a while. I want to go out and I want to change the world. Well, the thing is, I think a wise guy said, well, wise man, not a wise guy, but a wise man said, you really can't change the world, but you can change yourself. And that's what we need to have people saying, okay, I want to be a person that stands up for true law and order. I want to stand for the truth, okay? I want to treat people respectfully, okay? I don't want to go up and spit on people because I think they're Nazis and, try to hurt them in any way I can or attack them any way I can or, even try to interfere in their their duty as officers. I'm going to try to impede you. Well, a lot of them have found out that that's not a good idea. That doesn't make you a hero. It doesn't make you the star of your own show. No one's going to really pay attention. Oh, you got maced in the face. Oh well, have a nice day. Hope you don't choke on it. But again, and these people that are, again, here illegally, they have to be held accountable. It's like if you and I decide, now, again, it's a free country. I can do whatever I want. Well, there's going to be consequences to whatever you want to do. But if you decide that you don't want to pay your taxes for 10 years, can you do that? Can you get away with it? Possibly. But the day will come. It's inevitable when the IRS knocks on your door or sends you that envelope or whatever, and they basically pull the covers out from under you and they expose you. You say you haven't paid taxes in 5 years or 10 years or whatever. You thought you could get away with it, and maybe you did for a while, but the day of reckoning is coming, and you have nobody to blame but yourself. And the people that were here illegally, many of them have been here for 20, 30 years. In that time, they could have become legalized, naturalized citizens. But it begs the question, well, why didn't they? Because they don't want to be citizens of the United States. They don't want to be Americans. They want to live here, maybe make a good living, and no one faults you for that, but do it legally. But now, because you haven't done it, you haven't taken the time to do it, well, now you're suffering the consequences of your poor decisions. And that's all it boils down to. Now, again, a lot of these people are not just here illegally, they are, but they're also criminals. And that's why I think they've been going into all these sanctuary cities, because that's where a lot of them have congregated. They have their nefarious Okay, well, I'm trying to say the word, but I can't. I drew a little blank there. But they have their illegitimate businesses, nefarious. That's what I was going to say. Nefarious, quote unquote, operations going on, and they're now being, somebody's now turning a spotlight and saying, "Hey, look at those cockroaches." Look at those illegal people doing those illegal bad things, whether it's sex trafficking, drug trafficking, extorting. It happens, and that's wrong. Okay, and a movie I saw. I watch it periodically now, and especially now what's going on in Venezuela and everything. Is Sicario? Have you ever seen that movie, Sicario? That's a pretty heavy duty movie. That's a movie. If you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. It's very, very. I think it's true to life. A lot of people that I've seen and people in law enforcement say that Sicario is kind of like where it's really at. Okay, it's grim. It doesn't pull any punches. It's like really being there. A little taste of like what it's really like there, and then the corruption behind it all, and yeah, some of the. Some people might start turning that around and say, well, yeah, but look at all the nefarious things the U.S. government does. Well, okay. But it's a very fascinating movie, and I'll tell you what, if you haven't seen it before, I'm not going to give it away, but you're going to get a big surprise in that movie. I can honestly say that. If you're watching that movie, there is a big surprise in that movie, and it catches you off guard. It just, whoa! So, if I haven't piqued your curiosity with that, I'll leave it at that, okay? Well, anyway, thanks so much for taking the time to spend a few minutes with the old Holy Smoke and Pipe Padre, letting me pipe-tificate. Probably packed it a little too tight there at the bottom. But I'm enjoying my little Dunhill, along with this Dunhill. And maybe we'll give a review on Dunhill Elixir. I think this is the Dunhill Elixir. No, Dunhill. Oh, another reason why I like this, it's called Dunhill Icon. Icon. Oh, I like that. When you think of icons, you think of icons in the church, and you think of church, and you think of incense. Yeah. It all ties together. Yeah. Okay, well, again, Happy New Year all. This is, I think, the 9th or the 10th of, it's the 9th of January. We're kind of walking slowly into the new year. So I hope your new year is going well. I hope you're healthy and happy and prosperous. Live long and prosper. Okay. And light up your world and smoke a pipe. Or what? Light up your world and light up your world, light up a pipe. That's it. Light your world, light up your pipe, and light up the world. I can't remember my own slogan now. A little bit of dementia setting in, I guess. All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see ya on the next one. Take care.